I have a question for you. What do you think of when you see a bottle like this? Maybe it's kicking back at a barbecue or out partying with friends. Maybe it's a campfire on the beach. But this particular bottle has special meanings to me. When I was 18 years old, I joined a Baptist church where the people were excited about serving God. I got involved in the recording studios there, and for the next 30 years, I volunteered thousands of hours. It seemed like a great church. I enjoyed doing what I was doing. I thought I had found my purpose. Unfortunately, in 2004, most of the leaders resigned among charges of child sexual abuse. This scandal that we went through forced us into bankruptcy, and I was appointed as one of the trustees to close the church down. During that time, I learned that there had been 28 people in our congregation that had been victims of child sexual abuse. That broke my heart because I had been there for 30 years. I felt embarrassed and ashamed for being apart for so long and not knowing what was going on. I didn't know who these people were, but I began speaking up on their behalf, so much that I got fired from my position as being a trustee. Sarah was one of those victims that I was speaking up for. She had grown up in the church, and she was now a young lady in her 30s. One Friday afternoon, we sat at Borders Bookstore, and we talked for hours and hours. She asked if we would talk to the police about the abuse she had suffered at the hands of a family friend. He was also a church member, and he had been the property manager of our 25-acre campus. And this is why I saved that bottle, because it was that night when we were talking that I realized I had to admit out loud to somebody else that I had been a part of this church and didn't know the abuse that had gone on. And it was a turning point in my life because I decided that I had to do something. I couldn't just sit on the sidelines and not do anything. I became passionate about helping these people who didn't have a voice. They were alone and didn't know what to do now, years after the abuse had happened. Well, we did meet with the police, and after a thorough investigation, charges were filed against Uncle Rich on behalf of 4 victims from our congregation. I knew these girls needed an advocate, someone that would speak up for them, that their voices would be heard, and make their wishes known. And I wasn't trained to do that, and I really didn't feel qualified to do that. But it was the right thing to do, and it was something that I wanted to do for them. Sarah and I endured 7 court appearances before Uncle Rich agreed to plead guilty. It was quite a thing to sit there, hearing after hearing, and see the process that she went through, having to relive what she had gone through, the abuse that she had suffered. When I read their statements, the details they put in those statements, it made me cry. It made me feel like somebody should be helping them and no one was. The day of his sentencing hearing, I was there with Sarah. We went to the courthouse. We were there early, and we sat and we waited in a conference room, and we cried about the past and about how they had been forced to cover it up and not to talk about it. But today, she was going to be able to see her perpetrator finally face accountability for what he had done. We walked over to the courtroom and we sat on the front row like we always did in every hearing. The DA came back and asked her if she wanted to give a victim's impact statement. And she quietly said no, that she was okay, just to see what he was going to do, what he was going to say. Well, I watched Uncle Rich when he came in. He struggled to walk because he had leg irons on and he had his wrists chained to his waist. But I could tell by the look on his face that he knew his past had caught up with him. He knew that this was his day of reckoning. His lawyer wanted the sentencing to be in a county jail where it would be much easier for him, but the district attorney wanted him to serve it in a state prison where he would get more opportunity to get the treatment that he needed. And while they were arguing back and forth with the judge about the details of it, I leaned over to Sarah and I put my arm around her and I whispered to her, you know, it's okay if you don't want to say anything, but today is your chance to stand up and be heard. And she started crying because she wanted to say something. She had said a lot in private, but she wasn't going to until we had a short conversation in the courtroom there. And she said, yes, I want to say something. Well, she took my arm as I led her up to the witness stand. And when she started speaking, I wasn't quite sure what to expect from her, but her words and her calmness amazed me because she didn't lash out in anger. She didn't talk about what she had gone through, but she said that she hoped that he would get the help he needed so that there would be no more victims like her. And I thought, wow, for somebody to say that after all she had gone through, to know that he needed help, not as much as she did, but he needed help. The judge did sentence Richard to the maximum that was allowed under the 20-year-old law because he had to go by the law that was in effect. And you know, it wasn't much for these girls, for these 4 people that they had filed charges on behalf of, but it was something. Someone had cared enough, someone was there for them, someone listened to their story. And Sarah told me after that, she said, thank you for giving me the courage to stand tall and find my voice. And volunteering over this period of time, it was 6 or 7 years, I didn't think that would affect me like it would. I just thought I was going to be there to support her. But even after the sentencing hearing, I've been there for 7 more hearings with wanting an early release, or when he was released, he violated his parole. I've been back to every one of those hearings because I wanted their voice to be heard. I wanted their wishes to be considered by those making the decision. The DA even told me that I was a voice for the victims and that I represented them well. I'm not one that would normally go out and do that. I'm not one that would normally stand up here and tell you about my experiences. But for them, it was the right thing to do. It's something that made a difference for them. And I know that volunteering for Sarah and for this case, I know it affected her. I know it made a difference. But I also found my voice. I was able to stand up and say, that's wrong. Somebody needs to help them. And I have this Coke bottle sitting on a shelf at home. Every time I walk by it and every time I look at it, I think of the journey that I walked with Sarah. It's a personal story, and it's close to my heart, and it's something that I won't forget. And sometimes I wonder, you know, perhaps that was my purpose for being there, for staying for so long. And I look at this, and even today, I just say, you know, Sarah, here's to you. You're my friend, and thank you. Because of you, I found my voice. For volunteering and helping you, you did something for me. Thank you.